Don Weatherbee, CEO of RegenXx Tech, leads sustainable innovation by recovering over 95% of platinum group metals from end-of-life catalytic converters. With 20 plus years of senior leadership across mining, construction, and tech, Don drives strategic growth and operational excellence. Under his leadership, RegenXx has commissioned Module 1 in Tennessee and formed partnerships with recyclers like Davis Recycling, tackling catalytic converter theft and misuse. Focused on ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, Don combines financial acumen, collaboration, and people first leadership to make RegenXx a global leader in eco innovation and sustainable resource recovery. So, Don, welcome to the Motor Files.
I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off with the first question. What's different about diesel catalytic converters, and how is RegenXx solving this current problem?
So let me start with what the problem is. The majority of catalytic converters currently recycled are recycled through smelting process, which is really a large, and they're all melted down. Diesels are made of a slightly different structure. And to walk it through, there's primarily two types, a gasoline and a diesel. The gasoline and a catalytic converter, for those who don't know, appears to be like a portion of your muffler. Its goal is to turn harmful smog gases into less harmful gases. It does that by having a honeycomb plated with platinum group metals. As the air goes through the honeycomb and passes over these metals, it oxidizes and converts smog gas to less harmful CO2. So that honeycomb in a gasoline engine is made mainly of ceramic. In a diesel engine, the honeycomb is primarily made up of silicon carbide. The silicon carbide has a much higher tolerance to heat, and it needs that for diesel engines because diesel engines burn hotter. They also have the regen features that burn off the excess carbons and soot. So that higher burn threshold causes production issues for them. So they don't want to process the diesel catalytic converters in their system. So it was a piece of the market that wasn't being recycled effectively.
Thank you for that explanation. There was a spike in the theft of catalytic converters some time ago. Was RegenXx accused in any form of negative publication where this was concerned?
No, not really. The only part we had was people would joke, "Oh, so where are my stolen catalytic converters coming from?" But we're a part of the system that's doing regular, appropriate recycling, and even are involved in sections that have been included. Most of the supply chain related to catalytic converter now has know your customer, KYC components. And so you have to be able to prove, chain of custody of the materials to be able to move it down the steps of the regular recycling chain. We have even had to and wanted to turn back a couple shipments because they couldn't prove provenance. So the industry of as itself is trying to police this a lot more and avoid having these stolen ones enter the supply chain because we don't need it. There's enough out there in the traditional regular chain that we don't want the stolen pieces. We're just as happy to wait for it to end its life. We don't need to prematurely take pieces out.
Any idea how do thieves get money for the stolen catalytic converter? I know it's a deep police question, but for people might be curious as to what is driving this black market.
So, like you said, it was a spike and it's gone down somewhat. Some have their own backyard operations where they melt it down themselves with little furnaces. Some try to put it through smaller and smaller dealers. But a lot of these regulatory conditions have started to push it out from the fringes, combined with the markings of vehicle VIN numbers on catalytic converters so that you could tie them back. The rules have been shrinking the outlets available to the black market.
Okay. RegenXx right now is located in Alberta, but your factory is in Tennessee. Why Tennessee? Why not have it located directly there in Alberta?
Two main reasons. The first, and it's overwhelmingly the primary, was that we entered into a partnership with Davis Recycling, and their operations are located in Tennessee. So we moved our plant closer to the supply.
Okay.
And they're centrally located in Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the central location hubs for capturing most of the eastern seaboard of the U.S. So as an example, FedEx, when they first started up, their first primary hub was in Tennessee, and they'd
Okay.
fly everything in to Memphis and then rearrange and ship out from there. So it's a very central location to collect pieces. With every type of reuse recycling endeavor, you want to reduce the amount of transportation that you have. So you don't want to send it further and further away on cost and ecological footprint. Why not Alberta? There's just not enough cars in northern Alberta, and the transportation starts to increase. So the eastern seaboard was the most logical location to set up a plant.
Yes, it makes operational sense, and then you're always looking to cut back on your operational expenses. The concept of business is to involve much more than making a profit, but to see how well you can actually sustain and grow that business. RegenXx shifted from junior mining to clean tech. What actually inspired this transformation, and how has it shaped the company's identity today?
So it's a complete change in identity. Back in 2015, we'd sold a property and had funds. And so had a point of inflection there and said, okay, we have these funds. What do we do? Do we try to find another property to dig holes in? At that time, you know, the economics around a junior miner weren't very attractive. And so it was sitting there saying, we could keep doing what we've done and the old legacy, or we could look to see where the future was going to be. And at that time, we had a opportunity placed in front of us, which was a mining processing technology. So we purchased that. The original goal was to reprocess tailings of old gold mines. And then because what may not have been economical 150 years ago, you might be able to recover more gold from that waste piles. Once you start moving into a new technology, lots of people start to notice what you're doing. And we were approached with the concept of, you're processing the material. Could you process e-waste? Which we started. And once we got into that e-waste business, Davis heard about us and said, I have this niche in catalytic converters. Can you process those? So we started research in 2020 in the laboratory saying, could we do this? From there, we built a pilot plant in Tennessee and then designed and started to build our module 1 of our commercial facility. So we've gone a complete 180 on where we came from to where we are going.
So this is a part of what we would call a backward integration.
Well, it's looking at it as saying we've had a root, and as it's grown, it's made a few twists and turns because conditions outside have presented opportunities. So we've moved to where the opportunity is the best fit. We're not really integrated. We're a niche player that's falling into a larger circle of items around us.
Yeah, it fall right into the next question I was about to ask, because these are silicon carbide converter recycling. That's what I read on your company's information page. It is actually a niche market with significant challenge. But how does RegenX's process, how do you overcome these barriers and what makes your approach much more unique compared to traditional smelters in terms of the business that RegenXx is doing?
Yeah, the smelters don't want to process this silicon carbide because of operational issues in their furnaces. What we have is a hydrometallurgical solution. With our chemistry, we take the raw material, the powderized catalytic converter, and use a chemical agent to strip the platinum group metals from that, which then it's then in solution, which then we can take that solution and use another chemical process and drop the actual precious metals out of solution back into a solid form.
That name, platinum group metals, that's what it's called?
PGMs.
PGMs.
That's platinum group metals. That's primarily made up of platinum, palladium, and rhodium.
Okay.
The rhodium is mainly in gasoline. Your diesels primarily have just platinum and palladium in them.
Okay, well, these are technically chemical terms. I was never a science major. Myself and my audience are actually learning a lot, because so many materials actually goes into the process of making the various parts and mechanisms that operate the utilities we rely on in terms of transportation. We take things for granted, not knowing and understanding the processes and the people behind the scenes who make things happen. We just go about our daily lives, and a lot of people don't understand, once there is a service and you can provide that service, then a business is actually formed. But in terms of the PGM, is there a demand in terms of those PGMs right now? I want to lead into the next question. How does RegenXx help reduce the reliance on geopolitical sensitive regions like Russia and South Africa? Because South Africa is the leading country in terms of where some of those materials are found.
80% of platinum and palladium come from Russia or South Africa.
Yes.
So Russia has its issues, and South Africa has a lot of economic, electricity, grid, all those types of issues. So counting on those areas to increase production is a fool's game. And even on top of that, over the last 8 years, there's been a supply deficit of about 259,000 ounces. The demand for PGMs, platinum and palladium, has outstripped the supply from both the mining and current recycling by, on average, 259,000 ounces a year.
Okay.
So the demand, it's already needed. So there needs to be an increased capacity from recycling these materials, because we're already in a deficit position. And that's where we're coming in as RegenXx. We're focused on an area that hasn't been recycled for a large part of it, so that we can add to the overall recycle amount of the material here.
Okay. But I mean, that goes in collaboration in terms of what is happening right now in terms of environmental regulations, which are becoming stricter, particularly around smelter emissions and carbon emissions and all these things. How does RegenX's process, which reduces CO2 emissions by 95% and water usage by about 99%, how does the company position itself as a leader in sustainable recycling?
So fundamentally, what we do has negligible impact. We don't release hardly any CO2 in our process, and that 99%, that compares to mining. And so our process is contained in a warehouse type facility, indoors, so very small footprint for what we do. Sorry about that. So the other piece that there is the smelting. For every ton of material that they process, it creates 1,500 kilograms of CO2. Regulation-wise, the ability to add new smelters is not an easy or cheap proposition. So It's not like you can set up a new smelter right away to try to increase the production of these materials. Whereas we can be set up in almost any location, any industrial park we can be set up in.
RegenXx right now relies on partnership like the one with Davis Recycling for feedstock processing. Are there going to be any more collaborations, or Davis Recycling is the one you're just dealing with right now?
Right now, Davis is the one we're dealing with. They're a major player in the eastern seaboard of the US. We are looking at other alternatives of different partnerships, especially on the smelting side. In that baseline, they get material they don't want to process. So we become a natural outlet to process that material for them and then send them the final platinum group materials they're looking for. It's a way for them to increase their efficiency by utilizing us as a complementary business to them.
Okay. Not much. Not much players are actually in this field. I didn't get a chance to research the competitors out there, but I do think you may have competitors. No business stands alone in terms of a complete monopoly, but anywhere there is a market, more players will get into it, especially with environmental concerns and all this that we have beaten on us. Based on how you're explaining RegenX's operations, I think we should be paying less carbon tax in Canada. That's a big concern for most of us. The carbon footprint has been reduced, thankfully, to you and your staff. How does RegenXx plan to scale its operation to capture more than the 27 million scrapped auto catalysts produced each year? So many cars are being scrapped, but they're not being recycled as fast as possible. Does RegenXx has any plan to actually help to move some of those waste that is around us?
Yeah, so we started with module 1. We will look to increase the size and the throughput of our current facility to capture that market. And then we'll look to alternative sites geographically, like moving out towards the West Coast. You'll want to reduce the transportation for these items so that you make the best economic decisions. We do have growth plans to move from the current location and expand towards capturing more of that market. You talked about competition. We have some competition. Our major competition is smelters who will process some of the diesels with their regular feedstock to try to mix it and make it so there's less issues. But again, if they have another outlet, they'll look towards doing that. And the other competitors, there are some other competitors, but they're all in the laboratory stage. They
Okay.
have to still move from the lab to the commercial plant. And that is a momentous step. What works in the lab is not always able to be translated into practice. We solved 2 problems, and our history helped us along this path. The chemistry side is fairly simple. A lot of what we're doing is known chemistry, but you need to pair that chemistry with the mechanical side because we're changing the states of a lot of materials. You start with a powder, you have a slurry, you put other chemicals in, then you separate out solids and liquids, then you convert your liquid back into a solid. So the mechanical side of that is how do you move all those different states of material through your system? And when you're at the lab stage, most of this movement's done by pumps. Well, you can never go and scale down a pump small enough to really see what it will do at full scale. And so most of the times, the issues around the lab scale is that you brute force movement of material because you don't have a commensurate pump size. You get up to a commercial scale, and all of a sudden, that becomes a very major issue. And like I said, our history of the company was in material processing. So that material processing combined with the chemistry gives us a leg up on a lot of competition because we didn't start from the easy side. We started with expertise in the hard side.
Okay, it makes the process a little bit easier in terms of handling the overall production. That it actually makes sense. Thanks for that. I need to do a little more studying in terms of chemistry. So from the business standpoint, we only look at the numbers and the inventory, but in terms of the operation itself and the processes that goes into the smelting, that is a whole different ball game for persons such as myself. I went to Japan. I saw cars on the manufacturing line, but we never actually see exactly what happens during the end of life, the EV mandate. Is there any involvement in terms of RegenXx interests? Does RegenXx has any interests or challenges as it relates to EVs coming in right now? If there are challenges, would there be any concern on RegenXx part?
So fundamentally, we'll start there. EVs don't have catalytic converters.
Yes.
So because they don't need them, they're not producing gases.
Sure.
The concept of a catalytic converter over time is going to disappear. But there's a big, large but is that the regulations you talked about has moved more and more places to where catalytic converters were required.
Yes.
Originally, catalytic converters came in about the 70s, and it was responsible for reductions in smogs across the cities. But it was mainly in gasoline. And in the diesel side wasn't really affected. Industrial applications weren't the primary drivers. But air regulations have continued and required more and more diesels to be included. Now, any diesel
Right.
engine effectively requires a catalytic converter. Even your generators, those big cat generators that sit stationary, have to have catalytic converters on them. The amount of SiC, silicon carbide, that's entering the marketplace has been increasing exponentially over the
Okay.
last decade or so. That's where this has also become a lot more critical.
Mhm.
There's a part that has become a lot bigger section of the market that continues to grow. And it's continued to grow even with the reduction in automobile sales due to EV. But let's go back and say EVs. EVs are coming, and I'll admit to that, but they're not coming as fast as everybody predicted, especially in North America.
Mhm.
EVs get their big bump quickly for urban environments where you're driving very limited amount and small areas and, parking most of the time.
Yeah.
As it spreads out to more rural, that's where the challenges have become, where distances are greater, temperatures are greater. There's not as much uptake outside of the urban environment for the EVs. There's even less on the industrial diesel sides. Semi trucks, which are your big, large diesel engines, they're going to be some of the last ones that convert, because to do a EV style, there's a lot more weight added to the vehicle. And trucking,
Mhm.
transportation, it's all about weight and distance. I
Yes.
mean, it's how far can you go and how much can you travel? So if you add batteries in there, you've all of a sudden reduced the amount of weight that can be hauled.
Mhm.
And you've also had to, all of a sudden, it's not a stop for 10 minutes to get fuel. The whole charging infrastructure baseline needs to be figured out before EVs could really build into the diesel market.
Yeah.
On the flip side, it goes, okay, but the amount of PGMs required is going to reduce. That's also not true, because one of the bigger change options is hydrogen fuel cells.
Yeah.
And hydrogen fuel cells use platinum for their anodes to produce the electricity.
Mm.
There is projected to be more platinum demand for fuel cells than there is currently use of platinum. So the requirements for these PGMs in the new electrification is still there. So you still have to harvest these PGMs. And it comes from the old usage in catalytic converters. Let's say 30 years from now, we've completely changed over, 30,
Right.
40 years. which are ambitious targets. That day that no other combustion engine is produced isn't the end for us, because there's another 10 to 15 years life of the vehicles that are already on the road, because we don't get them until they're scrapped. So even after the last internal combustion engine is gone, there's still 10 to 15 years of supply that's making its way through the ecosystem.
Wow. Well, thanks for that explanation, because the concerns are in terms of EVs, but we all know no one actually sat down and thought it through. Only the manufacturers themselves know exactly the processes that goes into it. Back in 2009, I went to Toyota Motor Corporation, Toyota City, to see the manufacturing process too. They actually had electric cars inside the factory, not on a large scale, but they were mostly prototypes. They knew from then what it would take to have these vehicles out on the road, and the charging process, and how much more manufacturing would actually take place in terms of, the unavailability of the grid to sustain all these things. So it could be introduced slowly. Tesla had a niche market, but on a grand scale, it will be detrimental, because so many EV companies have came about and they've gone bankrupt because they cannot sustain the manufacturing part of it, especially a supply chain that requires materials that will be involved in the manufacturing process, especially for lithium ion battery. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. But what role do you see RegenXx playing in the broader circular economy? How does your process align with manufacturers' increasing push for eco-friendly closed loop production cycles?
So what we see ourselves is a way to close that loop for in the specifics of the catalytic converter industry, because what we intend to do is partner with manufacturers. From the automotive industry, you're aware of the core program, where most of the times your pieces are sent, mechanic takes it off and ships it back to the manufacturer for a core.
Yeah.
The catalytic converter can be part of that, and they can funnel the cores to us. We can produce regenerated platinum and palladium that can go back to the manufacturers to recreate new catalytic converters.
So so recycling is a major part of how we drive, because it is best to see how much we can eliminate waste. Companies such as yours ensure we can reuse some of the items we utilize on a daily basis. Don Weatherbee, ladies and gentlemen, RegenXx taking the time out to explain some of the processes in terms of what is company's contribution to us in terms of the environment and the wider society, keeping most of our lives better and improving the way how we go about on a daily basis, not knowing that they are the unsung heroes in how we live today. Don, thank you very much for taking the time out. I do look forward to getting more information so the wider public can understand the process behind RegenXx's operation.
No, it was a pleasure to be here. Always like to have these discussions. Let your audience know if you want more information on our story. We have a lot of detailed information on our website, RegenXx.tech. And if you're interested in being part of our story, we're a publicly traded company. We're listed on the Canadian exchange as RGX, and in the US as RGXTF.
Okay, thank you very much. People are always looking to purchase stocks and build their portfolio. So RegenXx is part of the wealth building facility as well, not only saving our environment, but also can actually increase our pockets. Are there any last thoughts you'd like to share with us before we let you go?
We're really proud of what we're doing and see ourselves as a leader in our industry, and we will continue to grow and push the envelope of what we can do.
Thank you very much. Don Weatherby, ladies and gentlemen, RegenXx CEO. We welcome him to the Motorfiles podcast, and you'll never know who we have next in terms of our unsung heroes. Until next time.